Welcome. So today we'll be talking about WebSockets and specifically WebSockets as it applies to Blue 3.1 Service Pack 1. And with this video, I'll be supplying three files. One file is the HTML page that will be running JavaScript to create a WebSocket to connect to the Blue runtime. The Blue runtime we'll be connecting to is this Modbus TCP master file. And then the third file I'm providing is another Blue project, which is the Modbus TCP slave. Of course, I could be using a PLC today, but I'll be using my slave as an ST6000 unit. And then the Modbus TCP master will be communicating to the slave. This will become obvious as we begin to control the communication by removing the Ethernet cable, and you'll be able to see what happens when there's no PLC available or there's some type of a error in reading the value for the variable. So let's take a look very, very quickly at the project. So I have basically a one-screen application. It's got some very basic graphics on it. We're showing var1 and var2. We've got an auto manual button as well. When it's an auto, it will auto increment the var1 variables, and then the var2, it will toggle the Boolean. So var1 is an integer today, and the reset button obviously will reset the data. Down below we have an alarm message display, which at this time isn't really useful for this particular video, but I may use it in a future video to show off how we can subscribe to alarms. So the variables that we have two variables, var1 and var2. These are arrays, and you can see they're hooked up to Modbus addresses. And the auto manual is an internal variable that I used to toggle the auto manual, and that's in the global scripts where the magic is happening. And then on the screen, I also have a local script for the reset data. That's it. That's basically the application. So let's see that running. Now I'm going to run today in simulation. So the example files that I'm providing is based on using localhost. Of course, you could use some type of IP address, but it's important to choose the correct simulation. Device simulate will simulate everything. That's as far as not talking to an external device. It'll try and simulate the PLC and HMI all in one. And then the simulate will attempt to talk to the external devices that you have hooked up in your Modbus configurations. So today I want to use simulate because I do want to talk to my ST6000 acting as a Modbus slave. So we can see right away that this over here on the right hand side is my HTML WebSocket example. So in this example, we're running JavaScript, which is establishing a WebSocket connection to the runtime. It automatically picks up that the runtime has started and begins receiving data from the runtime as it changes. So if I hit auto and manual buttons, we can see it auto increment and start changing some of the Booleans and integers. I can also turn it off, reset the data, and if I need to, I can type in data manually. And we can see it reflects over on the right-hand side. So pretty simple. We're going to recreate this, of course. We're not going to rebuild the Blue project, but to allow WebSockets to work, first of all, in the Blue project, we need to turn on the web server. So here in the project, if I go into the target, data access, web server settings, I have this box checked. That's enable. Of course, you can go with the default port number 8082 or choose your own. And for today, we're going to leave the security setting off. That's all you really need for the project. This will allow us access now to the variables within the project. So we're just going to minimize the Blue development for right now, and we'll leave the runtime running in the background. So I'm going to open up this example file so you can quickly see the code that we're talking about. So this is the code that's running in this particular HTML file, and you can see it's a very basic HTML project. All the JavaScript is incorporated into the single HTML file. We have a header with CSS styling going on, a script, pretty basic, and a body. That's it. So there's not much to this at all. So I will point out that I am using Visual Studio Code. This is a free package that's available for download. It's not as powerful as a full-blown Visual Studios, such as Visual Studio Community and then all the other professional levels of that software package. But it does have the ability for IntelliSense, and you can see some coloring going on. Some of that can be enhanced by some plugins. I have installed 5 plugins for today's demonstration. As well as you'll see that there's an HTML preview, which we'll use to show off how things may look on the HTML page without having to bring up a browser. Works really well for just HTML formatting, but doesn't work as well trying to show off your JavaScript stuff. You'll have to do that in a real browser. So we're going to build all of this from scratch. So I'm going to close that. We're going to create a new file. Now, Visual Studio Code isn't sure whether I'm doing an HTML file or some other type of project file, a Java file. So the best thing you can do is save it right away as whatever format you're going to be using. Our case, HTML. I'm going to put it in my desktop so I can find it very easily. And I'm going to call it my first WebSocket.html. Save. And there we go. We're on our way. So the first thing we need in an HTML file is the definition for HTML. Two pieces we're going to need. We're going to need a head, and we're going to need a body. So I'm not going to go into all the nuances of how HTML code works. I'm just going to zip along and get that stuff in. I'll slow down a little bit more when I get into the actual JavaScript portion, because I think that's where everything happens. But I am going to turn on my preview now. Split this so that you can see all of this running. So let's start by defining a table. So we're trying to recreate the view that we have on the web page. So if we look at the web page really quick, we've got the var1, var2, and then the data that's underneath, a horizontal line, and then a status message at the bottom. So everything above the line is in a table. We're going to create a table to hold all of that. So I'm going to start off by creating a tr. Then I'll put my titles in. var1. var2. Now we're going to do another tr. And we're going to stick a td. Now we're going to do a div. We're going to update this code a little later, but we need to put some text in there just to show, well, what do we want to have displayed when there's no connection yet? So I'm going to put in, NC for no connection. And then I'm going to copy this a few times. So you can see the preview is updating as we move along. And then I'm just going to copy this whole thing. And there we go. Now we have our table, at least basically in there. And then after the table, I'm going to put a line. And then under the line, I'm going to put another div with waiting to start as my status message. Okay, so this is all great, but I don't like the black background. That's being inherited by in this case, the Visual Studio Code. If my browser had some setting for the background, it would be inherited from it. So I'm going to force that by using some styling, some CSS styling. So I'm going to go up here and I'm going to start by configuring how I want each of these components to work. And we'll identify it by saying, okay, body, your background color is going to be white. And then we're going to tell the table, I want the table to have a border, but I don't want a border around the whole table. So I'm going to tell the table to border collapse And then I'm going to start formatting my data. It doesn't matter which order I do this in. I'm going to start with TD. I'm going to say the border. I want a 1 pixel border. I want it to be solid, and I want it to be black. And then I'm going to align the text to center. And then I'm going to change the color of the text, at least initially, because I don't have a connection yet. I want it to be red. And then I'm going to change the font size because I want nice big font, because this is the only data I'm going to have on this this particular HTML. I'm going to make it 50 pixels. I'm going to nice and big. Now I need to adjust my my headers, or the titles rather. I'm going to set font weight because I want those to be a little bit darker than the body of the table. And then I want to set the color to black. And then I want the font size to be 50 pixels, just like the others. There, starting to get there. Now I want to format the status message, but it's not part of a table right now, so I can't generally put it in there. So I'm going to go back down here, and I'm going to assign a class to this status message. So the class that I want to set up is totally up to me. I can call it any name I want. So I'm going to call it class equals, guess what, status. And then back up here, I'm going to set the dot status like that. Now what I want in the status is I want a line in the center, and I want it red to begin with. So I'm going to go text align center, yep. And then I want to go color and red. Oh, forgot one thing. I think I want to align the table to the center. So I can put that. Well, it doesn't matter whether I do that in the CSS or here. I'm going to do it here, just so I can do both. There we go. So now we have the table in the center. Okay, so that's the basics of our web page. That's where our preview is pretty much going to end at this point as far as being useful to us. All of the other changes we're going to start making will be in script. So I'm going to close this preview down. I'm going to close that as well. And I'm going to open this file we just had over here. But the first thing before I do that, I need to make sure I save it. And then I'm going to open it. Now I'm opening this in Google Chrome. So the version I'm using today, just so you can see, is version 79. And then obviously lots of numbers after that. But not all browsers support WebSockets. And as a result, we're going to do some code as well to check for that. But it's important to make sure that you have one of the latest browsers to make sure that you have the most up-to-date WebSocket support. So there's my first WebSocket.html. So moving on, we're going to start building the script. So the first thing that I like to do when I build a script is just do things a little one chunk at a time. So I'm going to define a section here, script. The type is going to be text / JavaScript. I'll put that in lowercase. It's up to you how you like defining your scripts, but this is the way I like defining mine. And then to be able to call this script, I need to do something as far as firing the code. So I can have a button on the screen. When I push the button, it fires the code. In this case, I want every time the browser loads the body, I want it to fire the JavaScript. So that way you don't have to touch a button on the screen, it just does it automatically. So what I'm going to do is go into the body. I want to say on load. I want you to run something, but I haven't defined anything in my script yet. So I'm going to go in my script, and this is where we're kind of jumping between the two, but in my script, I'm going to create a function, and we'll call it function run underscore web socket. Put 2 round brackets after it, and then now we have a function that we can call. So if I go down here into onload, I can choose run WebSocket. So it's already picked up on that. So Visual Studio Code has picked up that I have this guy here. Now I can't forget, I need 2 round brackets after it. So that's referring to if I was passing a value in. In this case I'm not. I just want it to run on start. So how do we know that this is going to work? One easy way of doing that is to do an alert. So I can say alert, and I can say something like, hey, it's running, or exclamation mark maybe on the end. Now you have to remember as well in JavaScript that we need to start putting semicolons on the end. So one catch about doing this style of programming is there's not the best debugging in here. So that's why we're doing just a little bit of code at a time, and then we're going to try it. So let's save this and refresh our browser. And we can see right away, hey, it's running. So it on load went and ran this code, and of course along the way finished drawing the HTML code as well. So yeah, so now we're getting there. Next thing I like to do, and it's up to you how you like to write your particular code, but the next thing I like to do is I like to do a try statement. So that way I can attempt to catch some exceptions. So I go try, and then I put my code in these 2 brackets, and then I have a catch, and I want to catch the exception. So I'm going to do round bracket exception. And then another set of brackets. So on the here, this is where I can put another alert if I wish. Alert, exception, and I'll go plus, and then I'll pass the actual exception in. I can concatenate onto that text. And then I can move this, hey, it's running, and put it in here. Save it, refresh. We're still getting, hey, it's running. We get no exceptions. That's pretty good. That means our code is so far working okay. So next thing I like to do, because we are going to be using WebSockets, I like to check to see that we are in fact using a WebSocket capable browser. So there is an ability to go if window dot WebSocket. So if window WebSocket comes back true, then it will again run some code. And then if it's not true, I want it to else, and again, and maybe another alert. And maybe I want something like WebSocket is not supported or something like that. So I can go WebSocket, put in capitals, web socket is not supported by your browser. Again, don't forget the semicolon. And then we'll move this alert again into this body. So if we save that, hey, it's running. So we didn't get a message about the WebSockets, and we didn't get any exceptions. We're moving forward. So next, we're finally getting into actually doing the WebSockets. So to do the WebSocket definition, if I'm using Java, I'm going to do something like a var, and then I'm going to use WS as my var name. And I want to say that equals new web with a capital S socket. And then in the brackets here, I need to put the path or URL that to my server. So in this case, the WebSocket server is going to be the blue runtime. The blue runtime is running locally, so I'm going to put in ws / local host. Now, I also need the port number 8082. So if you remember in blue, that was the default port number. That's the port I'm using today. Now, depending on your web server, sometimes there's more stuff you have to type in. So it just so happens in blue, there is more that you have to type in. So if we jump into the help of blue, I'll drag this out, and I go into the feature guide, and I drill into configuring the system, data access, connecting to web server, and if I look closely at the WebSocket, the path that I need includes /API/v1/ws. So that was buried in the manual. Let's go put that in /API/v1/ws and then semicolon. So that's defining that I'm going to have a new WebSocket. When I run this line, it's going to attempt to communicate to the blue runtime. Now, when it attempts to communicate the blue runtime, some things will automatically happen. That's part of the whole WebSocket definition. So as part of that WebSocket definition, we have some events which are thrown, so or can be thrown. So one, if I start using my WS variable that I have at the top, will be WS dot on message is 1, and we're going to do a function for that. Do a message event to be passed back to us, and we're going to put some curly brackets. The next one that we're going to have is a WS. So it doesn't really matter the order I do these in. Maybe what I should do is I'm going to put this above that one. ws.onOpen equals function. I can do something like, open event. Oops, if I can click on it. There we go. Open event. And then the third one that we care about, at least for today, is there's a ws.onClose. There are more. For example, there's an on error and so on and so forth, but hopefully you're not going to need those. Of course, you could add those in there if you wanted to. You could start typing in ws.onError. So we will connect. The on open is where once we've established a connection, we will then send our request for data. We will get a response from the data. And then if the server is shut down or something else happens to close the connection, we will get an on close event and we can react to that. If there's an error in connecting, it will typically fire the on error event and then go to the on close event in that order. So it goes to the error, then fires the close afterwards. So you'll see as we start moving through this how all of that comes together. This is not unique in any way, shape, or form to Proface. This is generally how WebSockets work. It just so happens that our blue runtime is able to work well with WebSockets. So let's start off with making sure that this is at least working in some way. So what I could do again is I could cut this particular message if we want, and we could throw something in here. So if we do get a successful connection, we should get an alert back. Let's save that. And we will start here. Hey, it's running. So the only way that hey, it's running would have come up is if we actually got an open off of the WebSocket. So that's good. That means the web browser that we have here is communicating successfully to the blue runtime, which is this simulation right here. So in fact, right now as we're talking, there's an open connection right now. So obviously, every time I refresh the browser, it will close off that connection and then move on to the next one. So now there is a limited amount of connections you can have at any one time to a Blue runtime. Today, I believe it is 5 concurrent connections. Luckily, the runtime will close down connections as the client does not respond within a certain amount of time. So once the connection is open, there's a certain amount of time that goes past. It'll check to see if the client is still there. If it's not there, it will close the connection automatically anyway. Now, as we move forward, we're going to start asking for actual data. Now, we need to start sending commands to get the data. So there is a limit as to how many pieces of data that you can ask for. So we're going to use a monitor command to say monitor a bunch of variables for us. Let us know when it changes. So we're not polling it from the server. We're sending a command to the server. The server will then create a monitor which will look at those variables, and when they change, send us a message. It will also send us a message on the first time that we add that monitor to give us at least the initial value of what that is. So to make that happen, what we're going to do is we're going to create a send. We're going to send something to the server. So we're going to go ws.send. Now, this is where we're going to have to start doing some JSON. So what is the format of what we're going to send to the server? Well, again, if we go back to the manual, I'm going to drill in again, feature guide, configuring the system, data access, connecting to web server, and I go to, for example, about WebSocket. I can see here that there is the way of connecting. I should get some type of a response, authentication if you want to do a bit of authorization stuff, but here is the real bread and butter. So we care about this one where it has the command, add monitor, and then we add our variables. So you can see that's a JSON format. So we need to send our command to add these variables in JSON. So 2 sections that will be JSON will be the command and the variable portion. So let's build that. I'll just minimize that for now. So here, I'm going to go wsend. Now, nice thing about most Java installations is you have the ability to do JSON. You can just call it, and then do something called Stringify. So Stringify just basically means we're going to build a JSON structure. So within that, we're going to put a curly bracket to start with. And within there, we're going to go command. And this is where we're going to put in that add underscore monitor. Now, we need to separate the data. And the next thing we're going to add is we're going to add a variable. Now, this is an array of variables. So if there's only one variable, you still have to define it as an array. The way you do that in JSON is you use square brackets. And I'm going to start off by doing an array for var1. Now, var1 itself is an array, so I need to define that. And I'm going to say var1, go get the square bracket 0 square bracket. So that'll be the first one in var1. And that should be what we need. Now, we need a semicolon on the end. Can't forget that. And if that goes well, I should get something back from it. So let's put an alert. And then in this alert, we're not just going to do a hard message like this one. We're going to feed back the message that we get from the server, and we're going to see it in the dialog that pops up. So go message event dot data. So that should give us the a prompt back. So assuming our code is okay so far, and again, we're doing this a little bit at a time so that we can troubleshoot this. Save, refresh. Hey, it's running. Well, that's good. That means it got to this part. So next thing is going to send the command to the server. Oh, that's very good. So now we got a response back from the runtime. The runtime has now responded with a JSON formatted string. In this case, this is a string coming back, and it's divided into data. There's an array of data, and then an updated and variable. So we can see the two sections, JSON, data, and updated, and then we have data is an array, and then updated is a static string, in this case called variable. So it's telling us what is updated, and we can see that in this array, we again have another JSON format, and we have name var1, and then quality is good, and the value is currently 0. So that's good. We got a response right back. What happens if I change the data on the server now? If I go 44 or some number in there, it's coming back again. So I didn't have to write any more code. You can see it's firing that on message section of JavaScript. So it's now running continuously in the background, waiting for events to happen. In this case, the message came in, so it's popping up on the screen. Now we see var1 quality good, value 44 on the data. Okay, this is very, very promising. So let's keep going. So one of the next things we want to do is we want to break out the data. So this is where, again, you're going to have to bear with me. We're going to do this in little bits and pieces. So we want to get the data from this message now. We're going to have to bust it out in some way, shape, or form. And we're going to have to grab the actual variable data. So there's two pieces we need to do now. We need to write some code in here, as well as we need to update our HTML so we can pass the data over into our web page, into that first row under var1. So let's do the HTML code first. So in the HTML code, what we want to do is we want to go to the div statement that's going to hold the data for var1. So that will be this first one here. So I'm going to put the type that I'm going to pass to it is going to be a text type. And then I'm going to put an ID equal to, and then because I'm somewhat lazy, I'm going to put var1 square bracket 0 square bracket. So what this is basically saying is I'm going to reference this particular div by using its ID. And doing that, I can replace everything between these two divs, which means in this case, the NC will get replaced with whatever I want it to replace it with. So over here on the onMessage, I'm going to start doing my magic. So the magic that I want to do, first of all, is I'm going to have to start breaking out my JSON stuff. So I'm going to go var JSON object. Now this is something I'm just defining. You can use whatever name you want. Equals, and now I'm going to use JSON again, but I need to parse it out for the data I care about. So if I go JSON.parse, and I'm going to, parse, and then I'm going to do message event dot data. So that's going to break out just the data portion of message event. So if we look at our runtime again, if I fire another message, just so we can leave it up there, so you can see I have different pieces of JSON here. I'm asking for just the data portion. So this dot data here refers to this data. So message event dot data is the entire message, just to be clear. And then now I'm going to break out the data portion of within the JSON message itself. So now I'm going to go var variable, because we're possibly going to have more than one coming through here, equals JSON object. That's the one I just defined above. But out of that JSON object, so within that string, give me just the data portion. So that should hopefully be just this section that has the name, var1, the quality good, value 55. It will not include the updated and variable portion. Okay, so that will go into variables. Now remember, that's going to be an array. So if that's an array, then that means my next statement is going to be affected by what I'm going to have for the array. So I'm going to go document dot, now document's referring to the looking at the HTML code, get element by ID, and in there I want to go get the one that's specifically called var1 square bracket 0. So that's referring to this guy down here. So moving on, once you've got him, I want you to do an inner HTML. So now we're going in between the div statement, two sides of it there, replacing the NC, and I want you to replace it with variables. Now that's the variable I have up here that I've defined, and then I want it to replace that variable with 0. So I want the first one of it. I can't just state variables because it's an array. I have to specify the index. And out of that variables, now I can choose, do I want it to show the name, the quality, or the value? So now I can type in dot value. Now it's not helping me with the IntelliSense because it can't see into what that object has in it for JSON right now. It's going to build that on the fly, but I'm telling the code to trust me. There'll be something called dot value within variables that I want you to go get out of that JSON. So if my code is good, and this is always the big if point, I've done quite a bit of code here. 1, 2, 3, 4 changes in code. So it's always a possibility I've typed something in wrong here. Maybe got a capital wrong, I forgot a semicolon, but that's why we're trying to do this in little pieces. So I'm going to hit refresh. Hey, it's running. I got my packet. Oh, I got my 55. Whew, everything went fine. We take a sigh of relief on that one. So the 55 is in there. Let's change it to something else. There's my update, 88, 88. Great, that's working. So we've got everything working for one whole variable now. So now what do we do if we want to have lots of variables? So let's take a look at that. I could start adding in my other variables in here. I could say, okay, let's start putting in comma var1, 1, and then we can start copying some of this because, you know what, I don't like sitting there typing it all in because I'm more likely to make a mistake. And 2. And then this one, we'll get this one right, and then we will copy it. So I only have to make one change, and we'll keep the comma as well. 1. And we will change that to 2. So now we have var1, so it's var1 0, var1 1, var1 2, var2 0, var2 1, and var2 2. So what that means now is we should get all of those back. Now before I start doing my code here, let's just see what happens when it responds now. What kind of message do I get? So remember, we still have this alert in here, which should tell us what kind of data we're going to get. Before we were getting var1 data, and we're just assuming that the first index was var1. Let's see what happens. I refresh. Hey, it's running, of course. Now we got a bunch of data. So in data, the first index now is var2 0. And then var2 1, var2 2, var1 0, var1 1, var1 2. So unfortunately, it didn't come back in the exact order as we wanted. However, you can see that all of them are being responded to on the first go. So how can we resolve this? So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pieces of data coming back, and we have to be able to identify which data is which. Now, this is going to require some code. Unfortunately, that's the reality of the situation. But to get around that, because we do have things in arrays, So the variables themselves are arrays, and the data is coming back as an array. We can start breaking down multiple data packets coming at once, or sorry, multiple pieces of data coming back at once in that data array section of the JSON. Again, confusing with the datas. So what I like to do is I like to use for statements. So I'll use a for var, we'll do x equals 0, and we'll say, okay, well, if start at 0, but then go to whatever the number of variables are. Well, how do I know what the number of variables are that are coming back? What if only 2 updated? It would be like a number 2. So what we can do is we can say, well, go to x as long as it's less than the variables dot length. So if I've typed that in, yeah, that's right, variables.length. So that's this variable here. I don't have to specify an index because I'm looking at the entire array and say, give me the length of the array. We're going to go 1 minus that. So in this case, we can see that the length of the array will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but I want you to go from 0 to 5, not including 6. We're going to auto increment x, and then we're going to say do whatever is between the curly brackets. So in here, now we can do things like I guess we've got a couple of problems as well. We'll have to identify which is which as far as Boolean goes as well. So maybe what we should do is, so what I mean by that is you see here, false, 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 88, 88. If I hit OK, it comes back false. Well, that's in the wrong spot. So that one really should be over here, I think, one of these 3. So we need to identify that as well. I need to move these into the correct spot. So I've got multiple things I'm going to have to solve here. So maybe before I start dropping them into the right area, I should finish my HTML code down here. So I'm going to take what I have here, and we're going to paste it in, and that's going to be var 1, 1, var, oh, sorry, 1, and that's going to be 2. And then we need to do the same thing again. So whatever way we want to do this, I can copy this, paste it in. Now I need to change that to 2, 2, 2. So now my HTML code's ready to receive the data. I'll save that. And then I need to start identifying, okay, well, how do I know which one is which? And where do I stick it? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say, well, take baby steps. Let's go in here and just put, we're going to put the variable name right in here. So I'm going to go variables, bracket x, dot name. So the good part about doing it like that is I don't have to worry about the order so much anymore. What I'll do is, in this case, it'll go look for the particular variable name. Now, if we refresh this page, you'll see the name actually comes out name. So variables x.name, it'll pull this name out here. And then, of course, it'll assign the corresponding one. And I need to change this to x because I want it to increment with this guy. And then it'll grab the corresponding value, which goes with that, and put it in the right HTML component. Well, we'll see. So let's save, refresh. Ta-da! And ta-da! So that's good. Let's take a look. Let me change another one here. We're getting it back 1, and it's updating. So let's get rid of some of these alerts because they're starting to get a little bit annoying. So I'm going to get rid of him, get rid of him, save, refresh. So it doesn't seem like anything happened. It should have taken our change. Let's find out. I'm going to kick it into auto, and we can see things are starting to update automatically, and values are looking like they are, in fact, correct. Okay, So that's looking good. So maybe now we can start getting even more picky with what we've got. Maybe now we'll care whether it's Boolean or not. And maybe the reason why you want to do that is the false here. Maybe I don't want this to be true false. Maybe I want this to be the pump is on, or pump on, or valve open, valve closed, or just on and off. I don't want true and false. So I have to identify now between the integer and the Boolean. So what we can do to get around that is we could say something like, okay, well, just like we were doing, I was starting to do before, but we don't have to. We'll go variables bracket x dot value is equal to Boolean. Then I'll say, okay, for those ones, I want you to do something. What I want you to do, I want to say, well, if the variable so dot x dot value is equal to true, then what text do I want to have for true? So I can go document. In fact, why don't we copy this? We'll at least copy up to there, because it's going to be that guy. And then we're going to say, okay, well, I want you to do, if it's true, I want you to be on. Else, because there's only one other option, I want you to be the same thing, but off. All right, and then obviously, if it's not Boolean, I need to do this statement up here. So I need an else after that one, because it's got to be an integer in this case. I know they're integers because these are the ones I'm asking for. I know their data types. So I'll know what to do with it. In this case, it's a number. So I'm just going to grab whatever the text representation of that is and drop it in there. Okay, so now I should be able to save that, refresh, and now I'm getting off. Run it again, and now we can see we're getting ons and offs. That's good. So moving on even farther, now what if we want to get the status message going at the bottom? So what we could do with that one is we could say, okay, well, maybe even before we get the data, what we could do is we could say, well, if I'm getting some type of an on message, I must have some type of a connection at that point. So I'll say at that point, I need to reference the status. Now, problem is we don't have a status ID. We do have a class for the status. So I need to first update this. I'll say type equals text, and I'll go ID equals status. Now there's a difference here. This ID for status is different than the class status. So it won't get confused. So up here we want to do something like document dot get element by ID, and we'll say, okay, the status is what we're going to get. We're going to do an inner HTML again, and then we're going to say equals connected to. Now we can get fancy if we want to. We can say, how about connected to ws.url, just in case we're changing that URL, or we're going to end up getting that URL from somewhere else eventually. I don't have to rewrite my code in 2 spots. It'll take whatever this address is that was used up here into play. So now maybe while we're at it, why don't we also change that text to green? So we can go document dot get element by ID. We're going to do status again. And this time we're going to change the style. We're going to go style dot color equals green. Let's see if that's working. Ta-da! So now we have the path down there, just like we were showing in the very first time I showed you this web page, the example. So that's working. But now we need to tell it what to do if there's a close. So if there's a close, maybe we need to indicate that that connection is now closed. So we need to take this same stuff we were doing here, go to the onClose, and see if we can update this. We'll change the color back to red. And instead of saying connected to, we'll say something like connection closed. And then we can get rid of the URL. We don't need that right now. And yeah, accidentally moved that curly bracket, but it should sort itself out. There we go. So that, let's see if that is in fact working. So I'm going to go save, refresh. That seems to be working. What happens if I shut the runtime down? That worked. But look what's not working. I don't have these guys changing to NC values. So that's not good. So I've got this guy working. Those need to change to NC values. So let's add a little bit more in this close statement. I'm going to say maybe I want to do even above this. We'll put it above it. For var x equals 1, and then what x is less than 3. We'll increment that. And then we can also say for var y equals 0, y is less than 3, y plus plus. Okay, so yeah, and then we're going to, this is where it's going to get a tiny bit complicated. Document dot get element by ID. So we're going to, I'll use a single quote just to be safe. We'll go var plus x. So we're going to build which variable we're going through as far as ID components. Plus, yeah, that one. And then we're going to go plus y plus another one. So this is the array portion, right? Remember, this is the ID that we're playing with. We're not playing with the variables themselves. And then we're going to go dot style dot color equals red. And then we're going to do the basically this portion here at least is going to be the same. And now we're going to set it back to that NC that we had at the beginning. Equals no, not connected, or no connection, whichever way you like to look at it. So both of those will go in. Now we'll save that. Let's test it. So no connection. That's to be expected because I've got the runtime off right now. Let's turn the runtime back on. We'll refresh this because we don't have it set up to auto connect, at least not right now. There we go. We're getting a connection. If I shut down this runtime again, there we go. NCs everywhere. So now I still have a bit of an issue here because maybe I want to do a little more formatting. And now we're getting kind of picky. We're getting our data in, but I'm getting picky now. So if we say, okay, well, I want this color to change. I want this to be green when I have data. So when the quality is good, I want it to be green. When the quality is not good, I want it to be red, but then I don't want to still show the data. I want the data to change to something that no one's going to get confused, that the data is not the correct data at that moment. So I can put like exclamation marks or something like that in there. So let's see how to do that. So let's go up here back to our on message, and we're going to go into the maybe this section right here at the very top, and we'll say, okay, well, if the we're going to say if variables, and then this specific variable we're talking about at the moment, dot quality equals good. So if you recall in the message, there was a string portion, quality, and if it's good with all in lowercase values, then I want it to do this next section of code. If not, then I want to do a different set of code. So we're going to take this if statement we had here, and we're going to put this inside of that one. Okay, we can save this and it'll indent things nicely for us. But in addition to that, I wanted to change the colors of things. So no matter which, whether it's a Boolean or not a Boolean, I needed to change the color. So I can do the same type of thing we were doing here before. I'm going to go document, so on and so forth. Grab all of that. And then I'm going to go dot style dot color. This is starting to look familiar, right? Equals green. And if it's not good, so the opposite or anything other than good comes up, then I want it to get those same element by ID, and I want to change the style, the color, in this case to red, and I want you to also in the inner HTML, I want you to set it to an exclamation mark. Let's see if that works. Save. Okay, so that's good. It turned it green. Now if I turn off the runtime, of course everything goes red. If I bring the runtime back up, everything is still okay. But what if I pull the plug on it now? So I want to pull the Ethernet cable. So we can see I've got an Ethernet connection to my slave. I've lost that connection according to the TCP master project running a simulation. And my WebSockets has reacted as well, saying that the quality is not good. So if I plug that back in, it automatically responds. So I didn't again have to write more code. The event looked after, the onMessage event looked after that for me. So we're almost done. We're at the point where we've got the quality looked after, we've got the good and bad, whether it's a connection going or not. So what do we do as far as maybe getting this to auto reconnect? What if I do shut down the runtime and I want it to auto reconnect itself? So if we look at the code, look a little closer, we can see that we have the on close. We've put all this stuff in for the close, but we need something in here to say do it again. Try and make the connection again. Now you don't have to do this part, ws.null, but I like to do it because I just like to do it. Some people say you don't have to do the this ws equals null. That's just clearing out anything that might be left over, but some say it's automatically done on the on close anyway. So that's up to you. But I like to do a set timeout command. And then in the set timeout brackets here, we're going to do a function. And in the function, we're going to do run WebSocket, bracket, bracket, semicolon. And then after my curly bracket here, I'm going to put comma 5,000. So what does that mean? That means every time I get an on close, it's basically gonna try every 5 seconds to reconnect. Why? Because as soon as it does an on close, it's going to basically attempt to run the WebSocket. The timeout will be 5 seconds. If it comes back to here, it'll run again. Because every time at the top here, this fails, so this new WebSocket, when it fails, it will, as I mentioned, go to on error, then on close, and it will run that code again. And then when that fails, it will run it again. and so on and so forth. But I've set the timeout for 5 seconds. That way, it's giving some time. But that should be all we need. Let's try it. Save. Refresh. Doesn't seem like anything changed, but this should be telling us right here. So if I close that, of course it closed. We've seen that work like that before. If I then restart the runtime, depending on where I catch it in that 5 seconds is in timeouts and such, there it is, automatically. I close it again, closed automatically, simulate, and she's up. That's it. So now we have values that are changing. We also have our quality working. I pulled the plug here. Quality's bad. And quality good. That's it. So that's all the code. So you can see as we've gone through this today, we've recreated basically what was in the example file. So not as hard as some may think. The hardest part is usually troubleshooting the JavaScript code. So and then of course, as you saw, having things in variables can make life much easier. If all your variable names are unique, you may have a little bit more work to do to try and break out individual variables and put them in their proper location, wherever you want to show that data. So, or log the data, whatever it is you intend to do with the data via WebSockets. If you have any questions or concerns, feel free to reach out to anyone at Proface. Thank you.